that has a lot to do with Black history, but that's another podcast.
Oh, that's another
for
matter
something
entirely.
else.
That's a thorny issue I'd rather not wade into here on the Hack Fraud Show.
We'll be getting into a lot of far more American thorny issues coming up.
Yes.
Indeed. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. This is the Hack Fraud Show, and we are talking about two contemporary auteurs, two contemporary African-American auteurs, who...
one a little bit more contemporary than the other.
That's true, but, Spike Lee's still working. He's got a movie coming out this year, actually.
Isn't he in those Capital One commercials?
He's in those Capital One commercials, yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson and Charles Barkley. Moving on.
Just one thing about Samuel L. Jackson. I never cease to be impressed that he manages to maintain friendships with both Spike Lee and Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, well, you know, it seems like Samuel L. Jackson is just one of those like super charismatic dudes who can keep like billions of friends all at once just by sheer charisma.
That's probably true. Anyway, yes, Spike Lee, he's still working. His new movie is coming out. It's called Black Klansman, and it's produced by Jordan Peele, so I'm there for that. So we will look forward to that. But we're talking about one of his most acclaimed, probably his most acclaimed movie. It's kind of
the Spike Lee movie.
The Spike Lee movie. That would be 1989's Do the Right Thing. And we are pairing that with Ryan Coogler's debut feature film, Fruitvale Station.
And he somehow went straight from Fruitvale Station to Creed.
Yes, he did, because that's how the film business works now.
Yeah, that's just how Hollywood works.
Good for him.
Yeah,
he's doing good stuff.
I think it's an indelibly good thing that like a voice like Ryan Coogler is in Hollywood right now.
Yeah, certainly. So we will get to those in due course. First off, as always, we open with what have we been watching lately?
Saw a trailer for the new Incredibles movie.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
Yes.
Why not?
It's like we had like a lengthy like text message conversation last night, and like I kind of want to like jump off of that. So like, are we excited for this? Because I'm kind of like as lukewarm can get when it comes to Incredibles 2.
Well, Garrett, you said you were excited. I'm skeptical because
I'm excited because it's something that's at least most of what the trailer consists of. It seems like it's something very different from the first movie, where Rob is a stay-at-home dad and has the task of raising the ferocious Jack.
I'm here for like superhero domestic drama. I'm getting a similar vibe from these trailers as I was from the Finding Dory advertisements and marketing, which is that, like, I don't know, I think this is going to be kind of a more toothless and less grounded kind of continuation of the story. Now,
I think that's a small tragedy.
Well, it's just, I mean, I really did not like Finding Dory much at all, but
I was immensely disappointed by it.
But I mean,
it had one good joke, but even then I took it too far.
That's because you just love Brexit jokes.
Oh yeah, with the British seals telling the one seal to get off their rock. Get off.
Yeah.
Oops.
I'm in support of that, but all corners of the internet clamoring for Finding Gerald can go fuck themselves. I don't know. I just, Pixar's sequels of late have been, not super great. I think Toy Story is the one where they really figured it out. I do think if Pixar is going to be making sequels, I'd rather see an Incredibles 2 than, say, a Cars 4, but like...
Yeah, but...
Or even Toy Story 4, which is happening for some reason.
Well, the thing about that, I think the Toy Stories are the only like good sequels. Like when we say like Pixar sequels, we only talk about the Toy Story movies because everything else has been rubbish.
Well, what's your quibble with an Incredibles 2 kind of in principle?
My quibble with an Incredibles 2 in principle is because like I really don't see the need for an Incredibles 2. I really don't care to go back to this world because like this world has been like very satisfying and been fully explored in a wonderful 2004 movie called The Incredibles. And I really don't see the need to go back to it, because I think Brad Bird has said all he has to say about it, and especially going back on the wagon of things Brad Bird has already said. Remember, the last movie he made was fucking Tomorrowland.
Which I don't hate, so I'm not inherently against this.
I was not a fan of Tomorrowland.
Yes, that's well documented.
And I just deeply think that, like, if this thing turns out to be good, I will be surprised.
Uh-huh.
I'm not expecting it to be terrible. I'm not expecting Tomorrowland, because I'm interested in single dad superhero.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like the Finding Dory comparison is right. I think it's just going to be like this diverse, like, nostalgia-driven vehicle, because like Pixar just has no new ideas for some fucking reason.
Yeah.
And like I find that immensely depressing, and I don't see really any reason why I should be excited about an Incredibles 2.
I'm approaching it with caution, but I'm not gonna try to deny anyone who is excited about it the right to be excited, including you, Garrett. I know we kind of ripped into it over text, but
well, I mean, I understand, and then also it seems like when they try to like introduce like the villains, from like, here's the scary, evil, sinister villain towards the end. I'm like, oh well, I'm bored. Okay.
No, that's another thing. Like the Incredibles, like the first Incredibles, completely just subverted that. Like the villain was like a comic buffoon. That was funny.
Yeah.
But
well, it's also a shame because the sequel comes, too late, 15 years too late, but they still have like the same.
I don't think Hollywood knows what too late is anymore, so I'm really not concerned about that. Like I think if anything, the internet age has just kind of squashed everything into like a Boolean cube of continuity. Mm-hmm. So like I don't think any time matters, because things are always like poking around and constantly being referenced and brought back, and The Incredibles is one of those things.
So it's something with high salt.
Yeah. So I don't think there is such thing as too late anymore, but I get it.
Based on what I've read, Brad Bird has said that he is much more interested in the family dynamic than saying anything else about superheroes. So I guess I support that. I don't know. I guess I'm fine with
that too.
I don't. We'll see what it is when it comes out. I don't know. I'm not expecting that much, but I'll take it. I don't know. Yes, Pixar could probably be better spending their time elsewhere, but what are you going to do? These movies make insane amounts of money.
Yeah. I mean, I get why they do them, but you guys want to talk about some real movies?
Sure, why not?
Let's start with Isle of Dogs.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to talk about this, because I saw Isle of Dogs on Friday night, and I was somewhat delighted.
Yeah.
It was very funny. It was gorgeously animated. It had some genuinely good, heartfelt moments, like Bryan Cranston is finally in good things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. And he gives a great performance. I think, the cast is about as stacked as you can get for an animated film.
It's insanely stacked.
Yeah. I can't remember seeing like a cast list that's just incredibly stacked.
When you have Frances McDormand playing a translator in your movie, you just have an embarrassment of riches on your hands.
And everyone's delightful in the movie. But like I think you're right to say it's a little bit lighter than his original fare, and I don't want to belabor this too much, because I don't want to be like one of the people who says like this movie's racist, because I don't think that. Yeah. But it's more ethnographic than I feel comfortable with, and I want to talk about that. Okay. Because like I don't actually mind the art style that much. I don't mind too much that it seems like somebody's vision of Japan for people who have never even heard of Japan since 1950. That's okay, because that all looks gorgeous and it's beautifully rendered. And I feel like he's doing that consciously, kind of. I mean, this is kind of, he said that this is his homage to like Kurosawa movies and whatnot. Okay. I would not compare this to Kurosawa, but okay. Well, I'll leave it at that. Though I think it also must be known that like his last send-up of foreign culture was the Grand Budapest Hotel, and it is clearly like not this. Yeah. not this like foreign-eyed like, oh, isn't it funny like how like Japan is poisoning people with wasabi sauce, and also how like the movie stops cold to hear a boy say a haiku.
I gotta like that.
These are the. Well, it's funny in context because you have Francis McDormand going, "Is that a haiku?" That's just genuinely funny. But I guess I'm here with Garrett because I'm just unsure exactly what to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen it yet.
And also, it must be known that like the only real characters in the movie are those who can speak English, and like this movie that has the bizarre creative decision to not subtitle people for most of the movie.
Yeah, that is kind of odd. I don't know what that was all about.
I think it's supposed to be funny.
Well, I don't know. They don't really.
Like, there's like two like, oh gee, I wish I could understand them jokes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you could argue that like it's because the protagonist of the movie is a dog who like wouldn't understand what he's saying anyway, but I don't know, that is kind of a flimsy excuse to hang this on.
That also extends that like one of our like main characters is like a foreign exchange student who exclusively speaks English in this Japan.
Oh, she is definitely the worst part of the movie.
Yeah, and I'm just like, ooh, though I must say my audience reacted quite rapturously when they figured out she was from Cincinnati, Ohio, so.
Good grief.
But regardless, I don't want to belabor this too much because I don't think this is a huge aspect of the movie, and I think honestly my bigger problem with it is the fact that like this is if I'm not going to tell Wes Anderson how to do socio-political commentary, but I think like the socio-political commentary he's trying to do shouldn't end with like the corrupt people saying they are corrupt and us moving into a glorious sunshine with like cute little resistance people running everything. I just don't think that's the future of America or anywhere, to be honest. But you know, it's Japanese fantasy land. I'll let that slide to a certain extent. Its metaphors kind of get lost in some places. I'm torn on this movie in several ways, but I still laughed pretty hard. I still thought it was really funny and really well performed. So, like, I guess, like, as, like, a piece of, like, diversive entertainment, I found it wildly successful, but we can always expect more from Wes Anderson than that.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see how he'll follow this. I think he was way more ambitious in like the form and the artistry of this movie than in the narrative and the characters. For once.
And it's gorgeous. It is like a sumptuous, like visual experience. Like every part of it is well realized. Like every shot is just so meticulously constructed, and it's just like wonderful to look at. Just like with Fantastic Mr. Fox, this is like a home run as far as technical construction is concerned. But like we never just go to Wes Anderson films to watch like kooky things move in like funny stop motion ways.
Yeah, no, I hope that this is not like what he's becoming, because honestly, like this movie kind of plays into some of the criticisms of him, that he is like more fixated on the aesthetics and stuff than the actual content of the movie.
I remember like at one point there was like one of those like hipstery like songs like you hear in like some of these things. I just realized like, oh yeah, this is every Wes Anderson movie I've ever seen. Oh God, I hope this isn't like a thing. Yeah. But I did enjoy it. And people seem to be responding pretty well to it. I hope this doesn't become like his default, but I am really glad that like someone like this isn't going into director jail.
Yeah, no, I want to see him continue growing and changing as a filmmaker, and I you know, if this is what it takes to, you know, get him to keep doing that, then that's fine. It's a minor work, but it is, you know. It's fine.
Few directors evolve quite like Wes Anderson. Like we are in like a radically different place now than we were with like Rushmore and Bottle Rocket.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think very few directors with a style as like meticulous and as like distinct as Wes Anderson is able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that is like worth celebrating from the get-go, and I don't mind it's as conventional as it is, because there are some like genuinely really good like heartfelt emotional moments.
Yeah.
But Isle of Dogs, I can't wait for his next film as always.
Yeah.
And I liked this one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just maybe is disappointment the word?
Maybe a little. I mean, it's hard because I think just coming off of Grand Budapest, like, that was such a masterpiece in every
Grand
way.
Budapest is one of the greatest comedies ever made, and it's just like a triumph of like both his like visual and narrative style.
Yeah. I just think that, like, anything after that was probably going to be a letdown. So, you know, you don't want to let expectations get too much in the way of these things.
I don't want to be like Darren Franich after like fucking Life Aquatic and say like I am done with him. Like, right. I never want to fucking do that.
Yeah, no. And this is still better than Life Aquatic. At least I think so.
I have less problems with Life Aquatic.
I know. Well,
but I'm not going to start that war again. Let's talk about Death of Stalin.
Oh boy, I would love to.
Masterpiece.
Yes.
I fucking love Death of Stalin. This movie is like, I mean, first of all, like, it is just like everything in my wheelhouse. It's about the death of like a like titan of the 20th century history, about like the socio-political like circumstances around him, and like how his death caused like a power vacuum and so forth, and just how like rich it is, both from like a visual construction and a narrative construction, and just it's really fucking funny.
It's so funny.
It's so fucking funny.
I mean, the first 10 minutes I was a little worried because I wasn't laughing that much, but like once they hit the scene where they're all trying to move his dead body out of his office, from there the movie just takes off. His own indignity. And it is amazing.
Okay, this movie is so quotable too.
Yeah. It zips, and the dialogue is razor sharp. The casting of it is so strange. Like, I would not have picked out Steve Buscemi as the man to embody Nikita Khrushchev, but he does a wonderful job.
I'm like, this might be one of my favorite Steve Buscemi performances. What can I say?
It's the most he's been allowed to do in a really long time, I think.
Yeah. Also, like, Jeffrey Tambor is fucking hilarious, and as like sort of successor to Stalin, but clearly has no idea what he's doing, what he's supposed to be.
Right.
And like, I adore just like the utter confusion of like, what the fuck is the Soviet Union when the man who built it died, and like all like the jockeying for power that happens afterward, and like how funny you can make a political power vacuum, and I think that's just like such a great thing.
Yeah.
So like I was just riotously into it. When it ended, I'm like, Jesus, it's ending now? Fuck, it feels like I've only been here for like 30 minutes.
Yeah. I was a little less enraptured, but I did like it a lot. I think it is a masterful work of political filmmaking in some ways, and just like such a rich comedic reworking of a period in history that you really would not think lends itself to humor.
Yeah, well, it just really gets a lot out of just like this idea of like the Stalinist era is terrifying, but it's also just so absurd and just so abstracted that like that in itself can be funny.
Yeah.
Like that's I think this is kind of like my vision of history, which is like it is sometimes just so chaotic and so random that it can be like really funny.
Yeah.
But the movie also like can sometimes like slow down and be like, holy fuck, what's happening? Like when the coup happens,
right?
And Steve Buscemi burns the head of the NKVD. That's a fucking brilliant scene, and just a great like emotional performance from Steve Buscemi.
Yeah.
And like the daughter of Stalin saying like, what the fuck is going on? And so forth. So like I just think I could go on and on about this movie. I think like anyone who has like even like a passing interest in political film should see it. I think it's just such a rich, wondrous portrayal of like the Stalin era and sort of like what happened right after the Stalin era, because like we kind of ignore the 50s in Russia. We just kind of say like Stalin died and then Khrushchev came out like 3 years later.
Yeah, I think it mines the absurdity of totalitarianism and that, like, you know, way of governing and the whole power dynamics. It just mines that for all it's worth, and I don't think we're ever going to see maybe a better dramatization of it, because to do it properly, you really have to capture just how absurd that all is.
Yeah. And also just how terrifying that absurdity can be. Like, we have, like, Nikita Khrushchev telling his wife, like, going through a list and saying, like, that's not funny, I can't say that anymore. Stalin didn't laugh at this, but he laughed at this, so I can say that more. And, like, the people at the fucking, like, concert, like, trying to, like, restage things and having to get a new pianist and having to get a new conductor. I'm just really shocked that, like, something like this concise is in theaters right now.
Yeah.
And I will take that for all it's worth. And, like, so far, I think this is my favorite film of the year so far. And I think it's going to be that for a while until something, like, truly transcendent comes out.
Yeah.
Incredibles 2.
Go fuck yourself. That's all I really want to talk about right now. That's all I really have to say about.
Okay.
For what I've been watching. Tyler?
Yeah.
What have you been watching?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. This was a couple weeks ago, but I finally saw Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon, which is fucking fantastic. It great acting all across the board. You got Pacino, you got John Cazale. They're doing great stuff. It is so well constructed, just as, a tense thriller, but also the richness of the character dynamics is really well done as well. The filmmaking is really just extraordinary. They, considering, almost all of the movie takes place on a single block, and much of that within a single building on that block, it is such a rich world that is created there, and it's really just a powerhouse of a movie. Like, it is exhausting in a lot of ways, very purposefully, but I honestly, like, I could watch this movie 1,000 more times. There's so many depths and layers to be mined there. It is really spectacular. So, that's that.
That sounds marvelous, and I would... maybe I'll go see that.
Yeah, check it out. Let's see, what else? Let me just run down some of these westerns that I've been watching. I've got kind of a backlog.
Because I assume you have a lot.
Yeah, I watched a movie called Johnny Guitar, starring Sterling Hayden and Joan Crawford. It is good. The first half I thought was much stronger than the second half. The second half kind of becomes a little bit more kind of a conventional Western standoff in some ways, but the setup of it is really unique, and that carries over into the second half in a way that, can't completely eliminate that. Basically, Joan Crawford plays this woman who's running a saloon in this town, and she comes into conflict with another woman played by Mercedes McCambridge. The kind of central dynamic is their kind of rivalry, but Sterling Hayden is also there as the titular Johnny Guitar, kind of her former love interest and whatnot. What transpires is really interesting. There are some incredible scenes in it. The first scene is just a really long sequence in her saloon, like with people coming in and out, and that was really extraordinary. The movie, I don't know, on the whole, like, didn't love it, but I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff in it that is worth talking about and thinking about. So that's Johnny Guitar.
Yeah, I think also, I'm just looking at stills. This looks like it has some, like, really gorgeous technicolor.
Oh, the color, it was done by Nicholas Ray, and the colors and the look of it is really, really incredible.
That looks interesting. I'm always a sucker for classic Hollywood technicolor.
Yeah. No, that's a good venue for that. Let's see. I saw HUD, Western directed by Martin Ritt, starring Paul Newman. That movie also I thought was really, really good. It's more of like a kind of a contemporary Western. The central dynamic is like Paul Newman as HUD and his dad kind of coming into conflict about the changing environment of the West and whatnot. It's been a while since I watched it, but I remembered liking it a lot. The character dynamics of it, again, are really strong. There's some great acting. The kid from Shane is in it, kind of all grown up and doing great stuff. And the lead female role in it is really well written and well performed in a lot of ways. I forget the actress's name, but she is really great in it. So that's HUD. Finally saw Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch, which I think this is another example of a movie that was so influential that it's hard to kind of look at and see what was innovative about it now. I do think the scenes of violence and the gunfights in it are still pack a punch, and his editing of them is so crazy that you still look at it and you're like, whoa, okay, this guy knew what he was doing. But a lot of it is kind of leisurely. The plot is like really kind of hard to follow at times, kind of maybe on purpose, but I don't know. I was sort of underwhelmed. Still worth looking at, I think. I'm finding more and more that I'm not a huge fan of Peckinpah, because I also watched Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, which was a later Western that he did. That was, I don't know, not super interesting. There's some good stuff in that, but, you know, on the whole, it's kind of hit or miss. So, I'm really not sure how I feel about Peckinpah.
I think I should get into Peckinpah myself.
He's interesting, and he's a name who comes up a lot. I still kind of want to see Straw Dogs, because I've just heard that movie is so crazy, but
I always ride hard for Cross of Iron, so...
Oh, that's right.
I think I need that.
I forgot about that. And then I also saw Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. It's a long movie. It's about 2 hours and 45 minutes. The first hour or so, I was kind of finding it hard to get into it, but once this movie started to pick up, I was really enraptured by it, and by the end, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, this is a classic. It's kind of like Sergio Leone just taking every Western trope you can think of and just mishmashing them together into this operatic, crazy blend of Westernness. You have Henry Fonda plays the villain. He is fantastic. Charles Bronson plays kind of the main mysterious man, kind of coming into town with a mysterious mission of revenge. Claudia Cardinale plays the leading lady. She is arriving into this town like after the death of this man that she's just married. She comes to his property, and there's a whole thing. This is another one with kind of a sort of a complex plot, but the aesthetics of it are, you know, as great as anything. It looks incredible, spectacularly shot. The acting's very good. Jason Robards is in it as another kind of gunslinger type of character. He's great. And I was really into it. I think, yeah, by the end, it really won me over. So, that movie is definitely worth checking out.
Seems batshit crazy, and I love that.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways. God, I need to see more Sergio Leone movies.
I don't think I've ever seen a spaghetti western.
Oh, really? Interesting. I saw...
I don't think I ever have, no.
I saw his first movie with Clint Eastwood, A Fistful of Dollars. That was a little while ago. I remember enjoying it, but that might be something we need to look at. God, if only I had the time to watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Maybe over the summer, who knows?
Perhaps. All right, let me quickly run these down because we're short on time, but I watched two Lynn Ramsey movies. They were her second and third film. She has a new movie out right now. I haven't gotten around to seeing that yet, but her second movie is called Morvern Caller. It follows this woman who wakes up to find that her boyfriend has killed himself overnight, and it's Christmas. The opening of the movie is really fantastic. It just kind of opens with her like lying on the floor. The Christmas lights are pulsing. It's really well done in a lot of ways. On the whole, I didn't love this movie. It's one of those art house movies where like the plot is very minimalistic and it just kind of moves from just one incident to the next. And it's very focused on like her inner life and kind of what she's feeling, but you know, it's all done in kind of an I don't know if I want to say obtuse, but kind of obtuse way. And I don't know, her as a character, like she was interesting, but I didn't find her like super well, I didn't love like being around her, although the actress Samantha Morton does give a very good performance. I don't know, perhaps I was just somewhat let down because I watched it shortly after seeing We Need to Talk About Kevin, her third movie, which was fucking amazing. This movie is so well done in so many ways. It came out in 2011, I believe. Tilda Swinton plays this character who has a very fraught relationship with her son, Kevin, right from the beginning. It kind of charts, and it cuts around in time. It's almost like, it's maybe like the best made, like, subjective movie that I think I've seen. Like, it very much adopts Tilda Swinton's character's perspective for it, you get the sense that you're just like kind of living in her mind, like going from her like current experiences, like through her memories as she kind of ponders things. It all builds to a real tragic kind of end that they foreshadow and that is kind of hanging over the whole movie. But Tilda Swinton's character is just incredibly written. There's very little dialogue, especially in the first half. It's all like a lot of information is communicated visually. Lynn Ramsey excels at just giving you like the bare minimum of information that you need and kind of letting you piece things together. And this movie does that extremely well. And I have not reacted so like viscerally like to a movie in a long time. Like I was sitting on the couch like gasping and like leaning forward and like leaning back in shock and horror. And this movie just really floored me in a lot of ways. And I hope I'm not overselling it, but I really think you should watch it.
This sounds incredible.
It sounds interesting, and it kind of sounds like what you went through watching it, sort of like me sometimes in a theater with friends, or whenever John says I can't handle 30 frames per second.
Well, not exactly like that, but certainly I was definitely very engaged with this movie. So that's that. I've really like not been able to stop thinking about it since I saw it. So that was just great.
As the best movies do.
Yeah. And then just to lead us into our main conversation, I saw Spike Lee's 25th Hour, which was really good. It surprised me in some ways. Edward Norton is kind of in it less than I was expecting. He's, the lead character, but it's as concerned with him as it is concerned with his friends and his girlfriend and all their kind of inner lives and things that they're going through. I mean, the script is fantastic.
Is it kind of similar to, like, Do the Right Thing, where, like, there is a clear, like, main protagonist, but it kind of, like, meanders into different stories into different places?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. I just wrote a paper comparing the two and kind of comparing his use of New York in them. It takes a much more, like, macrocosmic view of things. I think the famous thing about this movie is that it really engages with 9/11 in a significant way.
Isn't it that isn't it like fucking like Edward Norton like lives across from like Ground Zero?
He doesn't, but his friend does. Yeah, there's a scene where his two friends, Barry Pepper and Philip Seymour Hoffman, are just talking, and there's a long two shot of them with Ground Zero in the background, like right out the window. So he is definitely leaning into this. It's a very, very interesting movie, and the way he uses 9/11 in the movie is fascinating. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. But that wraps it up for what I've been watching. I finally cleared the list! I had all these movies just running down for weeks here, but I finally cleared them all. So, you're welcome.
We have a full slate.
We have a full slate. Alright, so let's get into the main event here. We might as well just start with Do the Right Thing. I think we're bursting at the seams to talk about it.
Yes.
Fucking incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely fucking incredible.
Yeah.
I was floored by this. I was floored. It was great.
I think this is one of the greatest New York movies that's ever been made, because I think it is as much about New York as it is about like Black America and Black issues.
He just provides such a kaleidoscopic view of this neighborhood and environment that he's creating, while also dealing with just towering social issues and just weaves it all together beautifully. I don't know how he pulled this off. Like, this movie is a goddamn masterpiece.
Just the style of it is just so enrapturing, and it's full of life and color, and this neighborhood just feels so lifelike and just so rich. I think that is, like, the best movies do that. It's like, you feel like you live in this neighborhood. You feel like you've experienced this neighborhood in a very visceral way, and I think all just like the little stories and the little character pieces just feel so alive, and you feel like these characters have just like been there forever. It's almost like watching a documentary about like a weathered cathedral. Just like, this place feels so rich and real.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And also just like how it like navigates like the issues of contemporary America, or at least like things haven't changed as much as we'd like to say since 1984 as it comes to the
Yeah, no, I mean,
So
Perhaps, yeah. No.
it pretty much gives you like a pretty good cross section of like the ethnic disputes that happen in New York, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, well, he weaves from between like so many different ethnic groups and like communities within this community on screen, and he treats them all with just an incredible amount of depth and respect and understanding. Like even, characters like John Turturro's character in this movie, they're still people. He
Oh
won't.
yeah, oh yeah. They're still like saying like, "Hey, are we gonna have enough money to do this? Shouldn't we get out? Like, what are we doing here?" And so forth. And I think like Spike Lee is also very clear about like where this family lies and like the hierarchies that are going on in this neighborhood.
Mhm.
And like as much as like we can say like, "Oh, they're Italians, they're part of the ethnic neighborhood," there's still only white people on that wall.
Mhm.
What part of the community they are from is just so alien to the neighborhood they're actually in.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was the second time I had seen this movie. I watched it a couple years ago. I don't know what happened because I was just so much more like I guess thinking back on it, I had become like more and more excited in the build up to watching it again. And this time, I don't know, I was yeah, like you said, Reed, I was floored in such a way that I don't know why I wasn't the first time, but it's such a masterful world that he creates while,
Yeah.
interweaving so many different things. And,
It's a world building exercise.
Oh, yes.
yeah. And the characters are all so unique and so just they all have their own like unique perspectives on like what they're dealing with, and he dramatizes that in
you remember
such a
every
great
scene.
way.
Oh yeah, and like
You remember every single one of them. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and every performance is wonderful. Like I
Yeah.
think there's a point where it's like Spike Lee's Mookie comes up and like at one point he just gives a look at Sal that just like burned into my memory that like and you just feel like there's like thousands of years of anger and frustration in that stare alone.
Right.
And I just can't forget that. And there's also characters like the mayor and like the three figures who sit under an umbrella and owners of that corner store and the man with the beatbox. And so like everyone feels like they have such a distinct history and that you've known them forever.
Yeah.
And like I honestly don't know how you do that. I think I might just be going back to this movie and trying to figure out like how do you create like dynamic and memorable characters.
Yeah, these characters very well feel like, and also with setting, it's like you very much get the sense that it's a very lived-in setting, lived in, worn for quite some time.
Yeah, everything's kind of crumbling, as like many American neighborhoods are. Everything's kind of crumbling. Everything's kind of like falling apart out of the seams, but it's still like lived in. It's still lively. It's still very colorful.
The way he just manipulates the neighborhood, and the visual way that he just if ever there was a movie that just so completely married its visuals to the story it's telling, like it's this one. Just it's all off kilter and crazy. All the like warm colors, the bright, vibrant red walls, the graffiti around the neighborhood, all that stuff. Yeah, the way they visualize the heat, like the characters are all constantly drenched in sweat. He like puts heat lamps in front of the camera to get those little waves. It's just he is in like such total command of his craft in this movie in so many ways.
Like there's I can't think of like many other films that are just like as in like control of like what they want their world to live in, what their world to be like. And it also must be known that like I am just so glad that like Spike Lee doesn't fall into the trap of like, oh, it's like a poor neighborhood. Let's like do it like fucking like cinema verite, Italian neo-realist piece. Like this is like this community is just so unique and so vibrant all its own.
Yeah. You could go on for hours and hours about all the amazing little touches that are in this movie. And God, just right from the beginning, like you get the jazz over the Universal logo, and then the Public Enemy song comes in and Rosie Perez dancing. She's like right from the fucking opening credits, he is like boldly announcing like, and he's like, he's commanding you will pay attention. And you're hooked for the
This
next
is
2
my
hours.
movie, this is my world, and this is important, and
Yeah.
you should pay attention.
And you
I
should also fight the power.
attention all the way
Yes.
through.
Yeah.
And goddamn it, this movie has one of the greatest climaxes I've ever seen. Very few movies just come quite to the crescendo that is the climax of this movie, of just like everyone we have met, all the tensions that have been rising had just come to a boil.
Yeah.
And just everything just is unleashed in this violent escapade that is just a masterpiece of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some of the camera angles at that point are wild too. And then when you got the first person perspective tilts, I was sort of thinking to myself when I watched this, shit's about ready to get real here.
Yeah, I just can't get the image out of my head of like what the character who like draws on like an image of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
And he just puts that up on like the charred, burned wall after the riots are over.
Yeah.
And like we just cut to black, and I'm just like, you could finish there, and I'd be like completely fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it goes on, and we have wonderful, wonderful conversations between people in the aftermath.
Yeah, no, I think that last scene, like, between Sal and Mookie is so interesting in the way it kind of just contextualizes everything that's happened. And, you know, again, he's just, like, never letting you forget, like, you know, these are all human beings, dramatizing their perspectives and showing you all sides of what is happening. And I just... Yeah, and I think another thing this movie does so well is, like, just building to that, you know, moment of explosion of violence and tragedy.
Yeah.
And, you know, it starts from such a silly thing where he's, like, you know, like, like such a trivial, like, why aren't there any...
I don't want to turn off my radio.
I don't want to turn off my radio. Yeah. Like, why aren't there black people on the wall? Just, you know, he captures so well how crazy it is that these things just get to the point that they do from just starting points that you would never believe.
I think Spike Lee is also just acutely aware of like what exactly the kind of weight that each of these images have.
Right.
And he also like never forgets like the structural concerns that create these like hierarchies, that create these circumstances.
Yeah.
That creates the situation where a riot is started because a man won't turn off his radio, and a pizza owner won't put black people up on his wall.
Right. Well, again, it just goes back to how well he shows the characters' perspectives, because, like, you totally understand, like, why Bugging Out would be upset about this, but you also understand, like, when Mookie is coming up to him and going, like, dude, like, why are you so upset about this? Like, just let it go.
Yeah. Like, he's a part of the neighborhood, and you like that excellent scene where Sal is talking to John Turturro, and he just says, like, this is my neighborhood. These people have been raised on me like this. What do you mean this like isn't our neighborhood? These aren't our people. Like, of course they are. I don't really know what more to say other than like what. And this movie has been like mined for like so much of like its brilliance over the years, and rightfully so.
Right. I mean, it was of course it was very controversial. Like when it came out, like reviewers were saying that they were worried that it would incite riots, which you know is obviously. Some malignant racism there coming into play, but I don't know. I just think that this movie is a total masterpiece, and you know whatever you think about like why Mookie like does what he does at the end of the movie, which is kind of the central question that everyone talks about with this. I think that like
and Mookie himself is like such a character like wrought with like he is like such like a contradiction of character at times, and that's really fascinating to watch as that develops.
Right. You know, he's a character who, you know, is trying to just live day to day and just get by, and everything happening around him, you know, just is so crazy, and I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's just...
In some way, he's kind of a subversion of, like, the old term Uncle Tom. Because he's working for Sal's Pizzeria. He's kind of under this idea. He's kind of complicit in some ways as to why the neighborhood is, which is why he talks to Bugging Out and says, like, look, man, just lay off. This isn't a problem. Just calm down.
Right.
But then the ending happens, and it's kind of difficult to understand like what to think of him. That's fascinating.
Yeah. No, there's no easy answers, and I don't have much else to say. I'm glad you all liked it as much as I did, and I'm glad we have this movie forever, and it just
I need to go see more Spike Lee.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Whew.
It's got a nice color scheme now that I think about it.
Yeah. Well, I kind of love like the idea, and I'm curious. I'm curious what like African American the black community and African American filmmakers have to say about this, because I kind of really love, like, especially Moonlight has this too, is that like these African American neighborhoods as like really bright and colorful and sometimes just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, just alongside, sometimes they're like bratty and depressed and sort of crumbling at the seams, yet they're also just like technicolor and gorgeous at times.
Yeah.
And I think like that's a dynamic that's just so interesting to see on screen, and I think like few have captured it as well as Spike Lee here.
Yeah. No, I mean he knew exactly like how to shoot it. He knows New York better than like any filmmaker since Scorsese, I would say. Like, and you can see this in 25th Hour too. It's his town.
Spike Lee is to like black New York as like Scorsese is Little Italy.
Yeah. Except Spike Lee was born in Atlanta, so.
Yeah, but do what you can. Do what you can.
So yeah, that's. Do you have anything else to say about Do the Right Thing other than go see it immediately if you haven't?
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. Like, it is kind of like one of the seminal pieces of black cinema, and I think just a triumph of a New York movie.
Yeah.
Fight the power. Yeah.
Fight the power.
Yeah. Whew. All right.
That's such a great opening song.
I just love Public Enemy.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah. But regardless.
Yeah.
Are we
right.
ready to talk about? I have some words about Fruitvale Station.
Okay, well, let me just preface it. So Fruitvale Station came out 2013, I want to say.
Was it?
Yeah, it was 2013. Okay. So yeah, Ryan Coogler wrote and directed it based on the real life incident of the death of Oscar Grant.
Yep.
Who was killed by transit police in 2009. And this movie, it's thematically similar in some ways to Do the Right Thing. It is kind of a piece in that they deal with
the police far more overtly than in Do the Right Thing. Though that is certainly a presence in Do the Right Thing.
Yeah. Shot on 16 millimeter, very cinema verite, all handheld kind of stuff. Michael B. Jordan plays Oscar Grant. He's great. I think he gives a remarkably kind of empathetic performance in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I kind of just don't. The thing about it is, like, Michael B. Jordan is so charming that I kind of don't believe that he has a trouble past and like, he can get angry.
Well, that's people are like that. They can, they have both sides.
I don't have as much of a problem with that as I should.
Yeah.
Because like some people like that, there's also kind of like a duality that sometimes there's a sense like he is performing when he acts up and he tries to act tough.
Mm-hmm.
But great actor.
Yeah. And I was kind of surprised by just kind of how simple and how like kind of straightforward this movie is. Like it all just kind of, it's like dramatizing, the day or so like leading up to his death, just kind of pretty straightforward. There's some like moments of foreshadowing in there that are not hammered too hard. I think they're okay. But it just kind of just moves from one thing to the next. He's just, going about his life, and then like when what happens, it just kind of comes out of nowhere as these things do, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, whoa, okay, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah, it's a protest movie in like a very distinct way. We see this man, and we see him like he's trying to build his life back up. He's moving forward. He has concerns. He has anxieties, and then he's shot, and that's it.
Yeah.
This man with like this like deep like familial footprint with like these like hopes and dreams and anxieties is just dead, and all of that is gone. And that is like kind of the point of it. I think the Roger Ebert review kind of like as lays this out very much. Like we are so used as like these figures as nothing more than just like little stick figures on TV.
Yeah.
So like to show like one of these like victims as someone with a life, with a family, who you can like empathize with on like a very visceral and personal level just die and be left out of this world via circumstances that are just random.
Yeah, totally.
And unnecessary.
Yeah,
that is powerful.
I think like what this movie really captures very well is just that like it can happen anytime, and it just like there is no lead up or build up or like anything to it.
There's no
just,
rationale. There's
no rationale. Yeah, nothing.
It just happens and it's over.
Yeah.
My issue with that is I don't think that makes a very good movie.
Well,
my thing about it is that like this, just from like a pure sort of like I am like here to watch a movie. I just paid for my ticket. I just sat down in my seat. I'm gonna hear this emotional journey. What we see is this man trying to piece his life together, and then he just fucking dies. Mm-hmm. And I understand the power of that from like a protest film perspective, from a black power movement perspective, and like its place within our like contemporary like racial society. Mm-hmm. I just don't find that very satisfying as like a filmic experience. Uh-huh. And I think it also must come down to is that like the film just isn't all that like sumptuous to watch. It just it doesn't have all that much atmosphere outside of like its main actors. Like Octavia Spencer's in here, and she's excellent. And, yeah. We can't say enough about Michael B. Jordan, but like I said this at the beginning, I'm kind of just fucking sick of cinema verite. I'm kind of just fucking sick of like, like black cinema is the new like Italian neorealism.
No, I can see where you're coming from, and I totally get the whole like, yeah, like this is again, it's very kind of stripped down and simple and straightforward. It there's not a lot of frills to it.
No.
But
I get that.
Yeah.
I get why.
Yeah, but I mean sometimes, this is just the way it is, like especially like when you're making like your first movie. I think that, there's a lot of kind of different factors that are at play there, and I do think that there is a lot of power in the way the movie does tell its story, but I do kind of agree with you.
I can't deny like what this movie means. I can't like take that away from it.
Yeah, and I do kind of feel the sort of the same way as you about how like, yeah, it wasn't necessarily like a totally like satisfying emotional experience, but I'm not sure how you can make a story like this into that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I call it protest film. Kind of the point of it is that it's not emotionally satisfying. It is deeply unsatisfying and unsettling. That's right. How it's constructed. I'm not here like to criticize it from like an ideological perspective, like I could like say Isle of Dogs. I'm here like to purely criticize it as like an emotional sort of like journey, as like how I view this as like as a film watcher, not really a film critic.
Sure.
And it also must be known is that like it kind of just like lays these issues on your lap without really much prompting, and I get that. And I don't think you always have to explain like these things to people. And not especially, I think it's very unflattering to watch this movie right after Do the Right Thing, which is just so rich and just so like fully involved in those issues.
Yeah.
But like, I also kind of feel like I'm here from the perspective of someone who has been like studying and interacting with like these sociopolitical concerns for a good few years now, pretty much, God, probably since high school. And I'm sitting here saying like, okay, that happens. It's a tragedy. I can move on.
Yeah.
It just doesn't stick with you very much. I think that's my like primary issue with it is that like it happens and it's a tragedy, and the movie has very little to say about it other than it is a tragedy, and that's not invalid. I just think that's like a little simplistic.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I think that what it's engaging with, I mean, yeah, other movies have like done more with it, like especially Do the Right Thing. But I don't know. It's just weird because like you look back at Do the Right Thing and the movie really has not like aged a day, in any way, which is really sad. But such a straightforward take on this issue. I do think there's value in it because I don't think you necessarily see that very often in like at least dealing with this particular issue, like in cinema. Like I think people kind of tend to
Yeah.
shy away from addressing it so directly.
Yeah, it is certainly to be said about like how much like we involve like cinema history, like how much cinema history is attached to this thing.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know.
I think just like as an island, I find it deeply unsatisfying. But like I can't quite criticize it from an ideological bend because I really do agree with it from like an ideological bend in many ways. I don't think you need to say like this is why the world is the way it is. This is what happened right afterwards. This is the cinema history that precedes it. This is like we are going to try and analyze all these things. It presents us a tragedy, and we're supposed to feel it as a tragedy, and that's okay. I just wish I just had a little bit more to take from it than that.
Yeah, I kind of do too. But I do think like as a first film, it is like kind of remarkably assured in a lot of ways. I think Ryan Coogler definitely like has a real command of film and film technique.
Yeah, there's never mistaking like what he's trying and what he's doing.
Yeah, and I think there are some like really like well observed like moments and images in this movie. Like all the stuff between Oscar and his daughter, especially, was stuff I really appreciated. And like that last scene with
I think all the scenes between like him and the mother.
Mm-hmm.
That's all incredible.
Yeah, and just that.
I wish I had a little bit more to say about it.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all kind of finding here. Garrett, I'm assuming you didn't watch this movie.
Unfortunately not.
Okay, well, that's fine. You picked the right one to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do think this movie is worthwhile, and I think it's well made and it's well done in a lot of ways. But I am kind of on the same page as you. I just wish there were maybe a little more to it. But I think, I maybe just kind of have been like thinking about this a lot, and I've maybe seen more like first films, kind of, especially like in the modern film business. First movies are a real tricky thing, and I think that this is a good kind of showcase of a director's talent, a good start to what is becoming an interesting career.
Yeah, I just usually don't like think of like the first film thing because I try not to grade things on a curve.
Sure.
But yeah, like the take on a first film of this magnitude, that's really impressive, and I can't befault that. And of course, I think Ryan Coogler does have a really interesting career so far, and I am really interested to see like where he takes himself, whether he goes into more of like a Hollywood lens, or kind of maybe tries to come back to more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With a bit more clout. So it's an interesting point in cinema history.
Mm-hmm.
And of sort of like our history, as it's sort of like trying to view these things from just such an earnest and stripped down lens, as you say.
Yeah.
And I can't take that away from it, even if I was pretty bored by it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of with you. I think it'd be interesting to see like him kind of come back to this kind of thematic and stylistic ground with like more clout as a filmmaker.
What kind of command he'd have over technicals? What kind of like the political landscape has dramatically changed in 5 years.
Yeah.
Almost to like a distressing degree, and like how much like that is put into it. I think I would be really interested to see that.
Yeah. I would recommend. I'd recommend maybe watching Creed if you have the chance. I mean, it's not like, it's not like a super kind of deep movie, but it is thoughtful in a lot of ways, and the technical stuff in that is actually, I think, really well done. There's some show-stopping fight sequences in it, and Michael B. Jordan is great, and Sylvester Stallone is also great. He does a lot with that, so I think that's kind of an interesting thing to look at.
Maybe I'll take a look at that, because like this like director does certainly interest me.
Yeah.
Even if I haven't been like too bowled over by his movies.
Yeah. All right, so that wraps up this one.
Very interesting week.
It was a very interesting week. I'm glad we did this. So, coming soon, we're gonna have our 100th episode blowout spectacular. We've got some great stuff lined up for that. I think it's gonna be very entertaining in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's gonna be God knows how long it's gonna take, but I'm super fucking excited.
But we have one more episode before we get to that. So what do we want to do? Milos Forman did just pass on, unfortunately. There's some of
I
his
saw,
movies
yeah.
that maybe we could look at if we wanted to do that.
We could do that.
I don't know. I mean, Foreman, because like his earlier movies, like he came from Czechoslovakia. He was kind of a leading figure of the Czech New Wave. Um, he made all kinds of different stuff, and some of his other Hollywood movies, I'm kind of interested in too. But
There's the Fireman's Ball. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He did that.
Yeah.
And he also did Amadeus.
Yeah, we could do that. Especially, I'm fascinated with Central Europe, and my family's technically Czech in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. Is there any what does his Czech work look like?
He has this movie Loves of a Blonde. I always hear is pretty good. The Fireman's Ball is one that comes up a lot. They're all pretty short. Fireman's Ball is 71 minutes.
Yeah. Huh. You want to try Fireman's Ball and what's the other one?
Loves of a Blonde.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm up for that.
Okay.
All right. So next week
I'm up to check some of his movies out.
Okay.
No.
All right. So next week we're looking at some early Milos Forman pictures as a tribute to him. Loves of a Blonde and The Fireman's Ball. This should be interesting. I haven't really seen any Czech films, and I think that will be a compelling kind of nation to look at in terms of its national cinema.
Yeah, neither have I, and like I'm deeply interested in like that part of the world, and I'm also just like I fucking love Amadeus and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a Romanian filmmaker that I've been meaning to check out that we might want to look into at a later date.
What's his name?
Christian Miungu, something like that. He directed this movie called 4 Months, 3 Weeks, and 2 Days. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's about like a college. It's about a college student trying to procure an illegal abortion under like the Romanian communist government.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We could do like a communist like film episode at some point.
That might be interesting too. Yeah.
Especially because like that would probably be an episode like both deconstructing like are they propaganda or not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could probably also talk about that. Would probably like lend us into like is propaganda art, and we have a lot of things to say about that.
Oh boy, do we! All right, well that will be a bit down the road. So Milos Forman next week. Look for that. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Do we have a summer theme this time around, or
I don't know if we've come up with one yet.
I would be comfortable with not doing a summer theme if need be.
That's okay.